Good afternoon, and welcome to this public input webinar on the 2020 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum. My name is Stephanie Gregson. I'm the Director of the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division here at the California Department of Education. I'm also the Executive Director of the Instructional Quality Commission, the advisory that will be in charge of the development of the model curriculum. I'd like to introduce the team who is working on this project in my office. Although you may not see their faces right now, they're here in the room. First, we have Cliff Rudnick. He's one of our unit administrators. His office will be managing this project, and today he will be managing the live comment feed for our webinar. Dr. Ken McDonald is one of our program consultants. Dr. McDonald was the lead on both the update of the 2016 History Social Science Framework and the 2017 History Social Science Adoption, and he has a great deal of experience in facilitating projects of this sort. Janelle Hope is a new analyst in our office, hired specifically to work on this project. She is a PhD candidate in Cultural Studies at UC Davis. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge Janet Mann, a consultant in the CDE's Professional Learning Support Division. We are partnering with PLSD on this project and hope to leverage Ms. Mann's extensive contacts in the field as the model curriculum moves forward. The purpose of this webinar, there we go. Yay. All right, the purpose of this webinar is to collect public input on the 2020 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Project. So in essence, we want to hear from you. This is just the beginning of a 2-year project to develop a model curriculum in response to legislation that was signed into law in 2016. Your input will be the foundation of a set of guidelines that we'll bring to the Instructional Quality Commission and the State Board of Education later this year. The guidelines will form the basic set of instructions to the writing team and the advisory committee that will work with the IQC to draft the model curriculum. We will not be responding to your comments today. At this stage in the process, we are just gathering information and hearing from you. We will try to acknowledge comments as they come in, but if we don't get to them all, don't worry. We're recording the meeting, so we will have all of your comments and feedback preserved. Please note that this is just the very beginning of what will be a long and inclusive process. We welcome your participation in the development of this historic curriculum and hope that you will continue to be involved as the document is drafted and edited. I will now turn the presentation over to Ken McDonald, who will go over the procedures for this meeting and provide an overview of the curriculum development process.
Thank you, Stephanie. We're using a hot swap model here to minimize the number of things that can go wrong. So, all right. This meeting is similar to the focus groups of teachers that we convene when we begin work on a curriculum framework. A webinar allows us to reach a much broader audience, but this format presents its own challenges. The WebEx software should allow you to see and hear us. Unfortunately, we're not really set up to provide live tech support, but please be assured that if you cannot get your comments in during the presentation, you can send them to us afterwards. All comments are valued as part of this process. We'll be providing a brief overview of the legislation. Then we'll be moving on to the guiding questions that we sent out with the letter that notified the public of this event. These guiding questions were also posted on the website where the connection information for this meeting was posted. To submit comments, please enter them in the WebEx chat window. You can open up this window by clicking Chat in the upper right on the WebEx interface. We will not be using the questions feature today, so don't click on our names to send us questions or to raise your hand. We recommend that you submit your comments to everyone so that they are visible to all participants in the webinar. Also, we will not be accepting audio questions, so you do not need to have a microphone set up to participate. You're welcome to respond to someone else's comment, but our main goal is to collect everyone's input on the guiding questions and to record general sentiments for members of the public that can help the Instructional Quality Commission and the State Board of Education as they begin development of this model curriculum. We're not really trying to open up a dialogue in this meeting or solve all of the thorny issues that are related to this topic today. Please be assured that members of the public will have ample opportunity to weigh in as the curriculum is being developed. So please don't feel like you have to get the final word in at this meeting. As Stephanie noted, we are recording this webinar, so we will have all of your comments compiled at the end. You can also submit comments to the dedicated Ethnic Studies email box that we will provide at the end of the meeting. The legislation that led to this process was signed into law in 2016. We had to wait until the legislature provided funding to begin work, but we're now ready to move forward with this project. Assembly Bill 2016 directs the Instructional Quality Commission to develop a model curriculum in ethnic studies. The legislation calls for the Commission to work with teachers and faculty members of ethnic studies. The model curriculum's purpose is to serve as a guide for local districts. The legislation states that the curriculum shall include examples of courses offered by local educational agencies that have been approved as meeting the A through G admissions requirements of the University of California and the California State University, including, to the extent possible, course outlines for those courses. Nothing in the legislation constitutes a mandate for local school districts, though the legislature does encourage local districts to submit course offerings for ethnic studies for A through G approval. The final deadlines for the model curriculum project are stipulated in the legislation and are listed on the slide. This chart shows how the model curriculum project fits into the overall work of CFERD and the Instructional Quality Commission. As you can see, this model curriculum project is in addition to an already packed schedule of curriculum frameworks and instructional materials adoptions. The legislature has already passed one other model curriculum bill related to Native American studies. There have also been recent bills calling for model curricula in financial literacy, service learning, the 2016 election, and media literacy. We expect to see some of those bills and other model curriculum projects to return in the upcoming legislative session. You can see from this project that we expect the model curriculum to be approximately a 2-year project from start to finish. The Instructional Quality Commission will be recommending a formal timeline for the project to the State Board of Education a little later this year. I'll return at the end of the webinar to go over some of the next steps for this project, but for now, I'd like to introduce Janelle Hope, who will begin the part of the presentation that you're all here for, which is to submit and gather your information on the Ethnic Studies model curriculum.
All right. Perfect. Thank you, Ken. And so good afternoon, everyone. And I want to thank you again for joining us on this webinar. As my colleagues mentioned, this will serve as the kickoff, which will certainly be a long process. In early December, letters were sent to ethnic studies educators at the K-12, as well as CSU and University of California faculty. The letters included the 4 guiding questions for this webinar. These questions were selected as they will allow us to focus on some larger or big picture points regarding the creation of the ethnic studies model curriculum. We recognize that these questions may be limiting for some, but for the sake of time and organization, we thought that these would be broad enough to begin some sort of early discussion. Additionally, we welcome additional comments and queries that may fall beyond the confines of today's guiding questions via email. And so that email address was included in the letter, and I'll state it throughout this webinar, but that email address is ethnicstudies@cde.ca.gov. Again, ethnicstudies@cde.ca.gov. And so just to get things started, I'm going to go through how this process will work. So I'm going to read off a question, providing a little bit of context, and then I'll read a submitted comment coming from you all, providing some general feedback and acknowledgement. But as Stephanie as well as Ken mentioned, remember that this is an input webinar, and the goal is to really be able to hear from you all, collect the input that will go on to inform the part of the writing process. But this is not a space to sort of be able to have a full-blown dialogue or be able to respond to each and every comment and or question. This is for the sake of time, and also because we are also very much at the beginning stages of this process. What will be most helpful in this process is to be as clear as possible as we will be able to, so we can be able to review all the questions and comments after the webinar. Additionally, to keep things organized as possible, as you submit your questions, please be sure to preface it by indicating what question you are responding to. So, for example, everyone is using the chat box feature. So if you wanted to respond to question 2, prior to writing your question, if you could write out Q2 and then your question or your comment, and that would be greatly appreciated. And so during this process, we will allow for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. We're doing really good on time right now. 10 to 15 minutes for comments on each of the 4 guiding questions. Again, if you are unable to comment, please feel free to email any questions or comments you have to the Ethnic Studies email address, which is ethnicstudies@cde.ca.gov. And so just some of the guiding questions to start. Here you can see them listed here. There we go. And so the first guiding question that we have is, what kinds of course outlines should be included in the model curriculum? And just a little bit about this question here. During the 2016-2017 school year, 218 middle and high schools across the state offered a total of 777 ethnic studies courses. And while those numbers are certainly a testament to the educators and the organizers that have worked tirelessly to see the inclusion of ethnic studies at the K-12 level, we must also begin to reflect on what are some of the best practices or approaches to teaching complex interdisciplinary content that has various genealogies and points of entry. Based on research that I've conducted in speaking with various ethnic studies educators throughout the state, reviewing existing course outlines, and in reviewing the work of scholars such as Alison Santiago-Cubales, who I believe is on the call, Christine Sleeter, Dale Allender, and others, it is evident that ethnic studies curriculum manifests and looks differently from classroom to classroom. Some of the different approaches that I've observed are, one, sort of what I'm calling the 4x4 method, where educators are spending exactly 4 weeks to cover sort of the 4 areas of ethnic studies, or the 4 ethnic groups within ethnic studies. So 4 weeks on African American studies, Asian American studies, Latino, Latinx studies, and Native American studies, and so on. And 2, I've seen a more sort of thematic approach that interweaves sort of discussions of the 4 core groups by focusing on concepts such as identity and narrative, systems of power and hegemony, counter-hegemony, humanization and dehumanization, and transformation and change. With more recent core concepts such as environmental justice as well as restorative justice being included, as well as indigeneity. And 3, another sort of theme that I saw or approach to ethnic studies within the classroom was the integration of ethnic studies topics like oppression, identity, hegemony, and racism into social science and English courses that are already existing when appropriate. For example, the selection of novels like Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston to not only discuss literary devices, but also to talk about racial and gender politics as well as violence. And so we understand that there are many approaches and ways to teach ethnic studies. For the model curriculum, it will be very important to identify what are some of the most inclusive as well as accessible outlines to guide the writing process. With that, we are looking to hear from you all with regards to what kinds of course outlines should be included in the model curriculum. What are some of the best practices or entry points for approaching ethnic studies? And so with that, I'm going to open it up for questions and or comments. And so I'll watch as the comments come in and respond to a few as we have time and as necessary. So I think we have our first comment. There's a comment, substantive material on non-white forms of thought to challenge paternalistic views that only the West is capable of universally thinking. Okay. Not sure if this is a question, but we'll wait for some more questions and comments to come in. But, oh, I see what they're trying to say. This would be a outline. Okay. Absolutely. So again, this is an opportunity to think about what sort of course outlines have been working for you in your classrooms. What do you feel, again, should be included in the model curriculum? This person is saying that concern about the 4x4 method. I'd advocate for a more in-depth approach. Absolutely, and that was something that I've witnessed that certain school districts have implemented. However, I would say from the research that I've gathered and the course outlines that I began collecting over the summer, I began to see a lot more folks taking a more thematic or concept-based approach. and looking at, again, some of those core concepts of hegemony, environmental racism, approaches to indigeneity as ways in which to begin teaching ethnic studies rather than sort of segregating the four core ethnic groups out. So being able to interweave conversations around concepts. Absolutely. So this person is saying incorporating a California history course. That sort of also incorporates ethnic studies. And absolutely, so we have been looking at what's out there. That's part of what Ken mentioned as being in the bill language, is we actually do have to identify the course outlines that are already in existence. And so I've definitely drawn on LAUSD, Oakland Unified School District, as well as quite a few other school districts, Fremont, that already have existing ethnic studies curriculum. So that has been part of this process and will continue to be part of this process, is really engaging teachers that have already created model curriculum of their own and course outlines, especially those that are already A through G eligible. We have another question, balance, again about the 4x4 method. Absolutely. And so I think that is something that we definitely have began talking about in this office of where is that balance between sort of the 4x4 method as well as the thematic approach, which may leave room for certain groups to be sort of missed in conversations and covered within the curriculum. Balance. Absolutely. The question with regard, or the comment with regards to community responsiveness, I think this will come up, and we'll have a little bit more generative conversation about that when we get to our question on ethnic studies pedagogy. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about sort of culturally responsive education and pedagogical models. Critical thinking. And so I see, just to preface it to everyone, right now we're on question 1. So I see questions coming in for different questions. Right now, if we could focus all responses and comments to question 1, that'll be great. We're going to try and spend 10 to 15 minutes on each question. So I see questions coming in for question 3 and other questions on pedagogy. So I promise I will come back to those, but I want to make sure we respond to the questions for question 1 right now. Absolutely. So someone raising a point around inclusion of indigenous peoples and Native American studies within the ethnic studies model curriculum. Absolutely. There actually will be, we will be beginning the Native American model curriculum process soon as well.
And we will point out that the mission project, the building the missions, that is something that is in the History Social Science framework as something that is not recommended.
Right.
So we will support that recommendation.
And so I've seen 2 times a discussion around the incorporation of Armenian studies into the ethnic studies model curriculum. At this point, we don't have a response to it, but we will be using the responses from this public webinar to be able to begin those discussions once we have a writer selected and that process begins. It has been something that has been brought up, and as a staff, we have had some early discussions because we know there has been a strong support of including that within the ethnic studies model curriculum, especially come out of LAUSD area. So it is on our radar. So there's a question, can we get a list of what outlines and curriculum have already been reviewed? So I will state from my research, it actually is quite difficult, and I've reached out to several teachers via the Ethnic Studies Now network, as well as teachers that I had sent some of the letters to. But it will be really great for folks to be able to continue to engage with the CDE so we can amass additional outlines and curriculum. There are some that are accessible online. I would say I've probably reviewed and have amassed about maybe 20 different curriculum and outlines. So we don't have a sort of definitive list yet. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I think there were 218 schools statewide that have authored K through 12, and I don't believe I'm nowhere near complete as far as hunting down all those curriculum and course outlines. But after this webinar is over, if you would like, please feel free to send over any ethnic studies curriculum or course outlines that you have access to, as that will greatly inform our process. PAR is in participatory active research, or participatory action research use is important curriculum needs. Absolutely. Absolutely. With regards to the question being, the curriculum being grounded in the history of ethnic studies, I think this has come up, and I've seen it in quite a few of the curriculum outlines, that there is sort of this discussion of the early sort of history of ethnic studies coming out of San Francisco State College. Someone mentioned a comment with regards to including a discussion on food and gardening. Some of the newer and more, I would say, culturally responsive and sort of hip outlines that I saw did mention things around environmentalism as well as food and indigeneity. And so I think those will be great things to possibly further incorporate into the model curriculum during the writing process. So I definitely appreciate that feedback there. Action, absolutely. I think we received some feedback and have had some discussions on with regards to how do we sort of breathe further life into ethnic studies. I think ethnic studies gets this sort of bad rap for being pigeonholed as being a form of oppression studies, right? But ethnic studies is very much grounded in action. It is very much grounded in chartering new futures and thinking through what are some of those solutions and being action-oriented. So absolutely, very good comment. Absolutely. So we have a good question from SFUSD. They examine specific historical content in relation to various communities of color within our concept-based approach. Our course overview lays out 6 units of study that reflect our core concepts, enduring understandings, essential questions, and the non-negotiable essence of our class. Teachers are encouraged to develop unit plans that respond to students in their classes. That's great. That's a really good model. Absolutely. And so I see another question or comment that says, with regards to A through G, I'd like to see that the course outlines satisfy A requirements of the A through G as history, social science courses. According to some, Our course overview lays out 6 units of study that reflect the core concepts. According to someone at the UC Doorways approval system, the vast majority of the classes are not sufficient to satisfy the history, social science coursework. Absolutely, and that was something that I did encounter in my research. Majority of the ethnic studies courses that are offered have not gone through the A through G satisfaction process, and that is something that is mentioned in the build language, is that this model curriculum should be satisfying A through G, and I know there is a push on the ground to get more courses throughout the state A through G satisfied. Absolutely. Here we have a comment on requesting that the curriculum be grounded in history, but also in language arts and social studies. We need space for generative, futuristic ethnic studies. Absolutely agree. And that ethnic studies is inherently interdisciplinary, and so that interdisciplinarity must show up within the model curriculum as well. It looks like some people are mentioning or making comments with regards to different resources, especially with regards, I see the California Indian curriculum, as well as the California African American Freedom Trail. We have begun some early discussions with regards to what resources might look like. And so those will be, if you have any additional resources that you might want to forward over, again, send them to the email, but yes, resources are appreciated. So I see a question. One challenge for my high school district is determining if we pursue an intro ethnic studies course, like an elective versus courses. What is the direction that the CDE plans to go in this regard? And so CDE will not be making any sort of comments or recommendations as to whether or not districts will create courses, electives. The creation of the model curriculum is done in an effort to be able to encourage districts to be able to create this, to be able to teach ethnic studies. Okay, there is no, the law does not mandate that is a high school graduation requirement or that it has to be taught. This is to essentially provide greater access for teachers and educators throughout the state to be able to teach ethnic studies, to be able to draw on from material. Great. Okay, so now we're going to wrap it up. Thank you everyone who was able to reply to question number 1. Now we're going to go on to question number 2. So this question is, what are the essential components of effective ethnic studies pedagogy? So thank you for all who sort of mentioned some of those questions earlier. If you could repopulate them, that would be great so we can have a little bit more of a conversation. Since the inception of ethnic studies movement at the San Francisco State College in 1968-1969, the goal has always been to provide a space within education where marginalized groups can learn about themselves, their histories, and their futures. Moreover, these courses, colleges, departments, and classrooms were to serve as a space that intersected with community. In the 2015 study, Towards an Ethnic Studies Pedagogy, Implications for K-12 Schools from the research, the authors argue that there are 3 primary patterns within ethnic studies pedagogy: culture and community responsiveness, and how racial identity development informed the teaching of educators they were observing. They argue that an ethnic studies pedagogy is directly connected to the purpose, context, and content of what is being taught, where the goal of the community responsiveness is central. In the pursuit of this, academic rigor is not compromised but heightened through applied critical consciousness, direct reflective action, and the growing transformation of leaders. Unlike other subject areas, ethnic studies educators across race have expressed how teaching the material has required them to adjust their pedagogy in ways that are certainly more culturally and racially responsive, inclusive, as well as sensitive, but also are grounded in creating space for emotion and affect within the classroom for their students as well as for themselves. Many are being forced to wrestle with discomfort, anger, struggle, passion, confusion, et cetera, and other different emotions. Based on your experience as an ethnic studies educator, as well as advocates that we might have on the webinar, what are some effective components of ethnic studies pedagogy? And so I'll leave it open. Again, we would very much appreciate any comments that you have related to question 2. And again, please use the Q2 at this point. Okay, here we go. So some comments that we see with regards to what are essential components to ethnic studies pedagogy. Teacher training, classroom in a box, videos, culture bearers. Absolutely. Again, more on training, sharing resources with other ES educators. Youth Participatory Action Research, PAR, absolutely. I think we saw that in the first comment. Community, I'm seeing several comments on with regards to, I think, the community responsiveness nature of ethnic studies pedagogy. Community, this person says community is essential in an ethnic studies class. We can't replicate the individualistic values and norms that drive typical education. I see a few comments that speak to additional sort of resources. So guest speakers from community, videos tying in current events with historical through discussion, explicitly teaching and weaving socio-emotional learning, self-reflection, empathy, goal setting, dreaming, healing, absolutely. Again, any comments or questions, but really comments on components to effective ethnic studies pedagogy. Absolutely, continuous teacher professional developments, reflection, and improvement techniques. Absolutely. I see someone referencing Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed and not advocating for the banking method. Absolutely. I think majority of the comments that are coming in are related to ethnic studies, pedagogy are all very much grounded in training and how do educators enter the classroom with said material, professionalism, not perpetuating oppressive structures. Absolutely. Another response or comment related to youth participatory action research. I think I also see a nice common thread of self-reflection within educators while teaching ethnic studies, distinguishing between individuals and systems. Any tips from current ethnic studies educators on what has been effective within your own pedagogical process or your own sort of teaching philosophy while in the classroom? Absolutely. I see a comment here on not misrepresenting, or I would imagine, culturally appropriating or presenting content in an authentic way. Absolutely. Absolutely, an investment. Oh, I think this is a really good comment. Oh, that's from Allison. I'm going to, also in Pedagogy of the Oppressed is the idea of dialogical versus anti-dialogical classrooms. So it is vital that we tap into students' funds of knowledge and experiential knowledge and help them develop their voice in sharing their insight and opinions in class, as well as help shape the content of pedagogy itself. Absolutely, meaning engaging the students in the actual construction of the class and making them feel empowered within the classroom. Absolutely. Great feedback. I think I see a common thread here of educators being somewhat vulnerable, again, sort of speaking to the self-reflection, but educators being critical of themselves. I also see a common thread here of centering and placing value on indigenous and historically marginalized knowledge, non-traditional sources, different forms of subjugated knowledge, and sort of decentering traditional sources. Okay. I'm going to read one more comment, and then we're going to get to the next question. Validate students' funds and knowledge and experiences, student identity as a starting point of learning and rediscovery. Okay. Thank you, everyone, again, for the comments and questions that you all submitted for question number 2. If I did not, again, the point is not to respond back to everyone, but we are recording this, and I'll actually be going through some of these questions beginning next week. Okay, so moving on to our next guiding question. What are some of the current challenges educators are encountering while teaching ethnic studies? The interdisciplinary nature of ethnic studies, the dense and often sort of emotionally rigorous subject matter and current political climate can present an immense amount of challenges for teaching ethnic studies at the K-12 level. Building on our previous discussion question, we are really interested in hearing more about some of the challenges educators are currently encountering while currently teaching ethnic studies. So it would be great to hear from some of our current ethnic studies teachers, those who are in the classroom or those who have experiences. What are some of the challenges that have come up for you all? And again, please, can we use Q3 for this one? Limited resources. And I think, with this model curriculum, part of the model curriculum will address that, right? This is an effort to sort of like help even the playing field and provide educators access to a model curriculum that they can draw from. Absolutely. Feelings of isolation, needing to seek out like-minded colleagues or other ES faculty. Again, no common understanding of ethnic studies. Many or most educators either do not have an understanding of ethnic studies or there is no commonly held understanding of ethnic studies. Again, part of this, the model curriculum process, will be able to provide a resource for educators who might be coming into the discipline with little to no knowledge. A challenge that one educator listed is on-campus collaboration, compensated opportunities to collaborate with ethnic studies teachers. If we want to plan together, we are expected to do some personal time in our departments. Our classes have fewer sections and less time focused during meetings. Currently, again, another sort of theme of lack of knowledge or background within ethnic studies. Lack of background into the discipline. Lack of support. And that actually will be coming up in our next question is what can we do to support, to offer better support to districts and to educators. Absolutely. I think this is a really good comment. Instill a sense of ethnic studies as a praxis and not just a field of study. I see another comment from Donna Nichols with regards to conservative groups coming in with funds sort of delegitimize ethnic studies. I see a comment from Veronica Valdez, critical pedagogy and a pathway for ethnic studies single subject credential and teacher credential programs. All teachers also need training and cultural proficiency in how to ensure their curriculum is culturally relevant. Even it looks like a comment with regards to even from at the university setting, parents are dissuading their students from taking ethnic studies courses. So it looks like more parent engagement as well, lack of support from admin. Okay. Just leave it open for maybe about 2 more minutes, and then we'll go on to the next question. So if you have any comments related to question number 3. I see a comment here. Ethnic studies is often seen as a people of color history, which I suppose is fine, but then my students of color matriculate to world history and spend the entire year studying non-people of color imperialism as though it occurred without victims. Departments in Sacramento City Unified School District are leaving their teachers of color to do great work with ethnic studies without critically rethinking other social science classes such as U.S. history and economics, right? And so absolutely valid experience from Dominique Williams, and I think part of the creation of this model curriculum is also being done in an effort to encourage other social science teachers to possibly be able to integrate some of the curriculum into some of those already existing courses so that burden won't be solely placed on ethnic studies teachers. Oh, someone from Texas. Where's that? Okay. We're implementing ethnic studies in Austin high schools currently, and it's clear that we need to move sometime in the future towards certification in ethnic studies and ethnic studies literature. We also need a stronger connection between the universities and our ethnic studies program. Absolutely. I think that's one thing that we're trying to instill with this process is engagement with California State University and UC faculty in the drafting and the writing of the ethnic studies model curriculum process. And we invited all ethnic studies faculty from the UC and CSU level to this call today. All right, you all, I think we're going to move on to our next question. Thank you for everyone who input a comment and or a question. Moving on to our second to last question. How can the model curriculum best support districts, administrators, and teachers that offer or are considering offering ethnic studies courses at their schools? So this is really sort of building off of our last discussion. AB 2016 calls on the CDE and the IQC to create a model curriculum in ethnic studies and encourages each school district and charter school that serves high school students to offer a course of study in the area that is based on the model curriculum. The aim is to create a resource that will be accessible to educators, subsequently providing them greater ease for the implementation of these courses. We are interested in hearing more specifically from you all on how might this model curriculum best support districts, administrators, as well as teachers. Additionally, we understand that this resource in no way will serve as any sort of definitive tool for teaching ethnic studies in California K-12 schools. So please feel free, as I mentioned earlier, to send any recommendations, any resources that you might have or that might be useful in this process to the Ethnic Studies CDE email, which again is ethnicstudies@cde.ca.gov. So let's open it up and let's use the Q4. Again, the question is, how can the model curriculum best support you all? So the districts, administrators, and teachers. The questions rolling. Can we have a couple questions with regards to the use of model curriculum? I think we should. Can we address that?
Sure. I'll come back to this, Brandon. So, as I was listening to your to the dialogue and to seeing your comments coming in, a lot of your questions are very good questions, but they're not questions we can answer yet, because again, we're just starting the process. Your questions and your comments here are going to inform the development of project guidelines, which will then go to the Commission and to the State Board for approval. Those guidelines will kind of set the parameters for this project. Now, we did tell you at the start what the legislation says. It's fairly bare bones in terms of what is in AB 2016. It does say that the materials the model curriculum has to include course outlines for courses that are A through G approved. And we heard the comments about some people saying the difficulty of that process and other challenges that are involved in that. So we are aware of that. We do have a couple of model curricula that are already been developed and posted on our website, so people can take a look at those. We have a Cesar Chavez model curriculum that includes an online primary source database, lessons that are developed for K through 12. We have a set of biographies that are scored at different grade spans and an assortment of suggested materials for Chavez. Does that mean that this model curriculum will take on that exact form? Probably not, because every project is a little bit different. But that is why we are getting input, and again, the law does say that we have to have input from K through 12 teachers. Now, it is true that the language of the legislation emphasizes high school, and most ethnic studies courses are offered at the high school level. But certainly the legislation provides for involvement of K-12 teachers. It also provides for and requires us to involve university people, so that's why we reached out to all the schools in California, the universities that offer ethnic studies courses, to be involved in this webinar. We're encouraging them as well to apply to serve on the advisory committee that will be making a lot of these decisions as we move forward. Now, of course, we have to all keep in mind that a model curriculum is not a curriculum in the sense that it's not actual instructional materials. It's not a replacement for a textbook. It's not a replacement for local curriculum decisions or a teacher's own work in developing their own classroom activities. Again, as Janelle said, and we've all been saying, this is a project that is intended to provide guidance. And so, you know, we're going into it with an open mind in terms of what it will include. But I think that some of these questions that we're getting, while very good, are questions that we can't answer yet because, again, we're just beginning the development of this project. So continue with that question.
Okay. We should address this next question. Someone's asking how do they apply to serve on the Model Curriculum Advisory Committee.
I'll get the next steps.
Yeah, so Ken will give next steps. I've got quite a few emails about that. But let me go up. All right, I'm going to go back up so we can get some of these questions. All right, comments. We need to have a team of culture bearer specialists in model curriculum available to do presentations in classrooms as teachers are already overwhelmed with core curriculum. Can the model curriculum explicitly lay out goals for ethnic studies courses, decolonizing, self-determination, validating one's own story, community indigeneity? Absolutely. I've seen some course outlines and curricula that actually do that. And so, again, this will be up to the writer, the advisory board, once they are selected, to be able to begin talking through what the model curriculum will look like. We are too early in the beginning of the stage to state what that might look like, but I think, again, these are some good recommendations for what the writing might look like and what the end product might look like. I think having a model curriculum or curriculum bank will be very helpful as an additional resource for our teachers. I think that it will be valuable to include some of the key pedagogical stances that will support ethnic studies implementation. I think that's a very great comment, having a model curriculum that includes discussion on some sort of the best practices with regards to pedagogy, and that's why we asked that earlier question that, yes, this is a model curriculum that will include a great deal on the content, but also including some discussion for educators with regards to pedagogy and teaching it in the classroom and implementing it within the classroom. Model curriculum must be community relevant at all levels, and this includes respecting localities. This means allowing as much participation from the design of the curriculum to the resources to what the professional development is needed to even the goals of this broader project. Absolutely, and I think we sort of addressed some of that or tried to get at some of that discussion in the earlier questions with regards to sort of what are some of the best practice or approaches to ethnic studies, and we see that there are multiple approaches, right? We talked about sort of the 4x4 method, the thematic approach, but again, that will be something that once the writer is selected, as well as the advisory board, they will begin teasing through some of these things. But again, these comments will very much inform them, and they're very much comments that myself, Ken, and others have already been thinking about. Someone is asking, is it possible to develop a list of names and perhaps cities and or schools of all on this call to get a sense of extent of input, both in terms of geographies but also school levels? And just in response to that, I will actually be going through this transcript and creating sort of an executive summary of the comments that are coming through with regards to access, creating sort of a network of the different ethnic studies teachers throughout the state. I am not sure if we will be able to provide folks with that information. Yeah. No, it's not something that we collect at the state level. Let's see. Provide funding so that districts can provide quality professional development. So again, I see more themes around professional development.
It's a great idea.
It is. We have no control over budget. Gathering any existing standards created by the districts who currently have ethnic studies programs or departments will definitely help guide future K-12 work, absolutely. The CSUs and UCs have, through both their history departments and UC History Project, have assembled week and 2-week-long seminars on various topics, partnered with the endowment, or it looks like the endowment for humanities, perhaps tasking the same universities to craft how to build an ethnic studies course in your district. Absolutely, I think that's a great idea of linking up with local school districts, linking up with their local CSU or UC to offer some sort of support for teachers. I know there's actually programming in the works at UC Davis for doing just that. Keeping model curriculum as guidance can allow for community responsiveness, thus thinking less of a core curriculum and more of a framework with working principles, general philosophical guidelines, extensive professional development, absolutely. More on professional development. More on the need for a bank to draw from resources on. Absolutely, I think past model curricula have had, I think in the past we've had a website before with different resources, so there are different ways that we can be able to archive different resources for this bank that folks are talking about, and that can be discussed once the writer is selected.
And the legislation does call for course outlines, so there is flexibility in how that, what form that could take. Of course, we have to get permission from districts to use their content, but that's definitely something that the legislation is consistent with the legislation.
Someone is saying we should collaborate with nonprofits, environmental organizations, et cetera, for resources, tools, and supplies. Again, if you have any of those resources or links or suggestions, please feel free to send them to the Ethnic Studies CDE website. I think these are all great comments. I know there are some local museums that my colleagues here at the CDE have been sharing with me that have great course outline, model curricula themselves that they teach for the students that they do outreach to. So anything like that would very much be appreciated. Any more questions related to how can we best support you all during this model curriculum of how can the model curriculum best support you all? Please feel free to get those in the next maybe 2 minutes we'll keep it open for. Thank you, Allison, for the link on community responsiveness. We have someone from Orange County. We have been doing ethnic studies with parents in Anaheim. In particular, some of the parents whose children are enrolled in ethnic studies classes. Bringing parents or guardians into the mix is essential and something I haven't really seen elsewhere. So families being included in the process is important, it sounds like, and something that's being suggested. Absolutely. Having a network of support will be very helpful. In New Haven, we've had a full department since the late 90s, early 2000s, have classes at the 7th grade level, and are now creating a team of teachers to articulate practices in K through 5. Would love to network. Absolutely. San Leandro High School is an existing 3-year academy model taught at the 10th through 12th grade. Okay, uh-oh, someone just came in, sorry. Taught through ES and social justice perspectives, so someone offering comments as well as resources with regards to different social justice models. Great. So this time I'm going to close our question number 4 and move to our final sort of opportunity for questions with, this is sort of an open one, any other suggestions and or comments. So we're now entering the conclusion. Before I hand it back off to Ken, who's going to close with some next steps and respond to some of the questions that folks had, I saw them. I intentionally skipped through them because we have a few slides that will address the questions related to the advisory board. But I want to provide a few minutes for anyone else to come forward with any other pressing questions, comments, suggestions, or concerns regarding the model curriculum. Please be sure to keep your responses as focused and concise as possible. And again, you can just input them. If you want to use Q5, you can. Lots of discussion around pushing for them to be A through G. I see a couple questions here that we definitely cannot respond to. So how can ethnic studies professors work with the CDE with regards to helping provide professional development to school districts? That's just something that our unit does not work on.
We can remember that this model curriculum is just the start of a statewide dialogue. What we did with our history social science framework, to give a recent example, is that once the framework was adopted by the board, we worked with the California Social Science Project and the Superintendent's Association to do a series of rollouts in professional development for teachers. We're up to 18 all-day events across the state to provide that kind of support. And we have college professors who are actually, I'm going to one in Fresno in a couple of weeks, where we have college professors giving presentations to teachers on a variety of topics from the framework. So we do support our documents. That's kind of a end zone celebration, and we're on our own 5-yard line, so it might be a little premature right now, but definitely something to look forward to in the future when this curriculum is developed.
So there is a question, is the intention to have working groups or teams to focus on the model curriculum in different grade level bands, i.e. primary, upper elementary, middle, high, et cetera? And so the current AB 2016 is really focused on creating an ethnic studies model curriculum for the high school level. So in response to your question, not at the primary or upper elementary or middle school level. And the goal is not to create working groups either. There will be a...
Well, we'll see when we get to the actual advisory committee and the guidelines. I mean, we don't want to say we're not going to just deal with K through 8 at all, but again, the law does provide a little bit of flexibility. As I noted earlier, the law does say we get input from K through 12 teachers. So there is an opening there. It does say the recommendation to districts does specifically say 9 through 12. But who knows? We'll see what we can cover in the curriculum, and if we get the input and the interest, then we'll see what we can include. But again, we can't really promise anything at this point. We're still just gathering in the gathering information stage. There was a question about whether the law requires ethnic studies, and I think one of our fellow webinar attendees addressed it. It is actually, it's funny because the legislation started out as a mandate that all districts had to offer an ethnic studies course, and once we told the legislature how much that would cost, it became an encourage. So that's a common situation, but that could happen at a later date. But in this bill, the model curriculum is a mandate on us, and the legislature encourages high schools to offer ethnic studies courses that are A through G aligned. Yeah.
Absolutely. Someone's thanking for providing this space. Any other questions or suggestions or comments?
There's a part about input.
Will there be any process for input from students, families, and communities who are not formally educators?
Everyone is welcome to provide input.
Absolutely. And so if you would like, please feel free to share the email address with any students, any parents, and those comments and questions and concerns will come in to me as well as Ken as we monitor the email box, and we'll be providing those comments and questions and concerns to the curriculum writer who hopefully will be integrating them into the writing process. Oh, I see a really interesting comment here around engaging mathematics within ethnic studies model curriculum. Mathematics could be so exciting in the area of ethnomathematics, particularly as it relates to sort of Mayan cultures. It's yielding great results in the pre through K forward. Each number is more than a number. Great feedback here.
And all of you who are giving us the name of your district, you can expect to be contacted from Janelle.
Absolutely. So everyone who received a letter is already on my outreach database that I've been collecting. If you would like to send me names, some of you already have, of additional educators or advocates, ethnic studies advocates throughout the state that you would like to be included on this email list, please again send them to the Ethnic Studies CDE email, and I'll be sure that they make it onto that. That list also will be used to inform everyone when the advisory board application is up and live. And so someone else asked me if I could reintroduce myself. My name is Janelle Hope. I'm a PhD candidate at UC Davis in Cultural Studies. And yes, you can email me. I actually monitor the ethnic studies box. That is my role here, is to work on this model curriculum. So you can email me at ethnicstudies@cde.ca.gov. And I think that will be it, and we're going to transition back over to Ken.
We thought this would be good because a lot of the things that I'm going to say actually address some of the questions we've been getting. We have indicated that many of these questions we can't answer yet because we don't have project guidelines yet. That is one of the things that's going to come out of this meeting. So let me go over a couple of steps that you can expect to see, and it'll also address the question in terms of how do I get to serve on the advisory committee. As we noted earlier, the Board of Education has not yet adopted a timeline for this project, but we have an internal timeline with some key milestones that we can highlight for you. We are planning on bringing several items to the Instructional Quality Commission at its May meeting. This includes the project timeline, the guidelines that will be developed from your public input, and the application for the advisory committee that will assist the Commission in the development of the model curriculum. After Commission approval, these items will go to the State Board of Education for approval in July. Once the application is approved, we will recruit the advisory committee in the fall. The application will be an online form that is posted on the CDE webpage. If you are on Janelle's email list, and like she said, if you're not already on it, you can send an email to that Ethnic Studies box and we will be sure to put you on it. If you're on that list, you'll be notified as soon as the application goes live. But we're going to have it'll be during the summer, so we'll make sure that we extend the recruitment into the fall so that we don't miss any teachers who are out on summer break, for those of you who still have such a thing. Once the Commission takes action to recommend applications, those will go to the State Board, which will appoint the members of the advisory committee. We are currently planning, and again, no timeline has been formally approved yet, but our plans are based on 3 two-day meetings in Sacramento where the advisory committee will meet. Those meetings will take place in the first months of 2019, the advisory committee will work with a writing team that is contracted with CDE to develop a draft for the model curriculum. The draft will then be posted for public review. All of our documents do this. Whenever we have a first draft, we make sure that the public has an opportunity to weigh in. The commission will make edits based on the public feedback, and then we will recommend, the commission will recommend the model curriculum to the State Board of Education. Final action by the State Board is expected in early 2020. As I noted at the start, these sorts of projects have a lot of moving parts, a lot of steps. This is a 2-year process, so we do expect to meet that deadline, which is stipulated in the legislation. As Stephanie noted, this is a long project, long process with many steps to go. So,
and if I can interrupt, there's a couple people have asked if the funding for the advisory committee and stuff is about to end in June 2018.
Right. The funding to support the model curriculum is given out on a year-by-year basis. We have already requested funding for the next budget year. So we anticipate the people in the legislature who have supported this project are still there. We are moving forward as though this project will be funded each year until it's completed. And that's just the process we go through, you know, being in Sacramento, annually working with the budget. So we're moving forward. Even though we're at the end of our webinar presentation, I do encourage you, if you have more questions or comments, to email them to us. We will address them. Again, many of the questions that are being asked we just can't answer right now, so if you do not hear back from us, it's not because we don't like you, it's just because we don't have an answer yet. And again, any feedback you want to provide, share this email. We'll maintain an ongoing list of emails so that people on that list that Janelle maintains will be notified every time there's a development in the project. And on behalf of the California Department of Education, I'd like to thank you for participating in this public input webinar. Please do remember that we welcome comments at any time during the process. Again, if you want to get on the list, you know what to do. And we do hope that some of you who participated today, particularly many of the people who submitted those very detailed questions showing a broad breadth of knowledge in ethnic studies education, will continue to be involved. We'll submit applications to serve on our advisory committee. Again, those applications will be posted this fall. And with that, I will bring the webinar to an end. And again, if you did not get a chance to put in a last-minute question, the conversation will continue on the internet. So thank you very much.